She was renowned for her dazzling beauty, immense wealth, and her ability to capture the heart of an emperor. She became the powerful empress of the Austro-Hungarian Empire during the 19th century. However, her life was far from the fairy tale many imagine. It was a series of torments and tragedies, far removed from the idealized depictions of romantic films from the 1950s. Known as Sisi, she was a sensitive, cultured, and multilingual woman with an unyielding passion for travel. Yet, she always seemed out of place, as though her mind belonged to a time ahead of her own. In this narrative, we will explore the most human and real side of Sisi, the legendary Empress of Austria, who became one of the most iconic female figures of her era. Sisi was born on December 24, 1837, in Munich, in the Kingdom of Bavaria. She was the daughter of Duke Maximilian and Duchess Ludovica, a direct descendant of Bavaria's earliest monarchs. Ludovica, born a princess, lost much of her social prestige by marrying her cousin Maximilian, retaining only the title of Duchess. Their marriage was unhappy, the relationship between the two was distant and lacked love. Despite this, they had 10 children, 8 of whom survived and grew up healthy. The family led a modest life for their position, with Ludovica personally educating her children and often helping the servants with household chores. Maximilian, an eccentric man, spent most of his time traveling, leaving him almost entirely absent from parenting. During winters, the family resided in a palace in Munich, but summers were spent at Possenhofen, an estate purchased by the Duke in 1834. This location was a favorite for the children, who lived freely and enjoyed close contact with nature. Sisi spent her days riding horses for hours, caring for animals, swimming in the lake, and hunting alongside her father. Although their relationship was distant, she deeply admired him as they shared similar personalities. Maximilian despised court protocols, ceremonies, and obligations, preferring a simple life, an attitude considered eccentric at the time. In 1848, Ludovica traveled to the court in Innsbruck with her daughters, Nene and Sisi, to visit her sister, Archduchess Sophie. At that time, Sophie lived there with her 4 sons, 18-year-old Franz Joseph, 16-year-old Maximilian, 15-year-old Karl Ludwig, and 6-year-old Ludwig Victor. Ludovica, consumed by worries, believed it would be almost impossible to find a suitable match for her daughter Sisi. She was convinced that the young girl did not possess sufficiently attractive features and was distressed that, at the age of 11, no worthy suitor had yet emerged. However, fate had other plans. When her cousin Karl Ludwig first laid eyes on Sisi, he was utterly captivated. It was not only her beauty but also her cheerful and spontaneous spirit that sparked an unexpected passion in him. This began a correspondence between them that, over the years, nurtured a special bond. However, as often happens in melancholic stories, the passage of time caused the letters, once filled with enthusiasm and hope, to become increasingly sporadic, leaving behind only an echo of what once was. That same year, Franz Joseph ascended to the throne at the age of 18, although the true power was wielded by his authoritarian mother, Sophie. Known for her strong character, Sophie was often described as the only man in the Imperial family, and Franz Joseph rarely made decisions without consulting her. In 1852, Sisi experienced a secret love that blossomed in her young heart. She was deeply in love with a young man who worked for her father. This love filled her days with dreams and hope, but destiny soon intervened cruelly. One day, her mother discovered a portrait of the young man hidden among Sisi's belongings. The decision was swift and merciless. the young man had to disappear immediately. With unrelenting determination, her mother found a way to send him far away, ruthlessly ripping him from her daughter's life. The young man eventually returned, but he was no longer the same. Gravely ill, his health deteriorated with each passing day until death claimed him. Along with him, it also claimed Sisi's happiness. The news plunged her into overwhelming sorrow, a grief so profound it seemed endless. She shut herself in her room, a prisoner of her own despair, spending her days in tears and sighs. She wrote letters and heart-wrenching poems dedicated to her lost love, as if trying to preserve his memory in every word. Her mother, deeply concerned, watched as her 15-year-old daughter lost all the joy that had once illuminated her life. The only reprieve from her sadness came during moments on horseback. It was then, and only then, that a spark of happiness returned to her eyes, fleeting as a ray of sunshine breaking through stormy clouds. Ludovica began preparing Nene for an arranged marriage with Emperor Franz Joseph. Nene, who was charming, cultured, and refined, appeared to be the perfect candidate for Archduchess Sophie. The meeting between the young couple was set for August 8, 1853, in Bad Ischl, the imperial family's favorite summer retreat. Everything was meticulously planned for the trip, but in an unexpected twist, Ludovica decided to bring Sisi along. Sisi was going through a period of deep melancholy, and Ludovica hoped the trip might uplift her spirits. Moreover, she thought Sisi might secure a match with Karl Ludwig, accomplishing a 2-for-1 arrangement. Initially reluctant, Sisi ultimately agreed to join. They arrived late, exhausted, and disheveled after the long journey. Still mourning the recent death of an aunt, they faced further inconvenience as their luggage failed to arrive on time. Sophie quickly arranged for Nene to be dressed impeccably to make a good impression on the young emperor. Meanwhile, Franz Joseph waited anxiously in the hotel lobby, eager to see his intended bride after several years. When Nene finally appeared, dressed in morning black, he found her beautiful but, in his own words, too serious. In contrast, he was utterly captivated by Sisi, who unintentionally commanded all his attention. Karl Ludwig, noticing this with growing jealousy, remarked to his mother that Franz Joseph was clearly enamored with their younger cousin. That evening, at the Imperial ball, Nene wore a stunning white gown adorned with jewels, emphasizing her elegance. Sisi, by comparison, wore a much simpler ensemble in pink and white. However, throughout the evening, the emperor's gaze remained fixed on her. Nene was relegated to the background as Franz Joseph invited Sisi to dance. At the end of the ball, he presented her with a bouquet of flowers, a public declaration that she would be his wife. Fireworks lit up the night sky, but Sisi did not share the excitement of those around her. Franz Joseph's unwavering attention and the scrutiny of the guests made her feel deeply uncomfortable and out of place. Confused, she struggled to fully grasp what was happening. The following day, Franz Joseph informed his mother, Archduchess Sophie, of his unchangeable decision. He wanted to marry Sisi. For the first time, he openly defied Sophie's authority. She tried unsuccessfully to persuade him that Nene was the more suitable choice, but Franz Joseph was resolute. When Sisi learned of his decision, she felt overwhelmed and unsure. She knew her sister was more mature and better suited for the role of empress, but she also understood she had no choice. Her fate was sealed. Ludovica begged her sister Sophie to treat Sisi kindly, knowing how challenging it would be for the young girl. At only 15 years old, Sisi was woefully unprepared, having received none of the education or training her elder sister Nene had undergone. Sisi, confused and unable to fully comprehend the situation, accepted her destiny. The entire empire witnessed Franz Joseph's overpowering passion for her, though little is known about Sisi's feelings at the time. She remained spontaneous and dreamy, a stark contrast to the seriousness of her fiancé. Nonetheless, the two shared a mutual love for horses and nature, which created a small yet meaningful bond. Immediately, Sisi was thrust into rigorous preparation to become the new Empress of Austria. She spent her days with tutors, learning court protocols, etiquette, dance, and proper decorum. None of this truly interested her, not even the lavish dresses and jewelry she received as gifts from her future husband and mother-in-law. Nene felt deeply humiliated and disappointed by the turn of events. Over time, however, she came to understand that Sisi was not at fault. She even began to feel pity for her younger sister, imagining the immense challenges and difficult life that likely awaited her. In April 1854, Sisi wept bitterly as she bid farewell to her childhood home and boarded a ship that would carry her down the Danube River to Vienna. The Austrian people greeted her warmly, charmed by her simplicity and spontaneity. However, members of the imperial court were far less impressed. To them, Sisi lacked the dignity and sophistication they expected of an empress. On April 24, 1854, Sisi and Franz Joseph were married in a lavish ceremony at the Augustinian church in Vienna. Yet, Sisi soon realized her worst fears were coming true. Life at the imperial court was starkly different from the free and relaxed environment in which she had grown up. The rigid court protocols suppressed any spontaneity or display of affection, leaving Sisi feeling utterly isolated in a cold and unwelcoming environment. Her situation was further complicated by the constant presence of Archduchess Sophie, who relentlessly criticized every aspect of the young empress's life, her dresses, habits, interests, and even her way of walking and speaking. Although Franz Joseph was deeply in love with Sisi, his imperial duties frequently kept him away, leaving her entirely under the dominant influence of her authoritarian mother-in-law. Sophie became an omnipresent and oppressive force in Sisi's life. During the early years of her marriage, Sophie's interference was so overpowering that when Sisi gave birth to her first daughter, also named Sophie, 1 year after the wedding, it was the Archduchess who decided how the child would be raised. She considered Sisi entirely inexperienced and unfit to care for a baby. From the moment the child was born, she was taken to her grandmother's quarters, far from Sisi's, and the young mother was permitted to see her daughter only a few hours a day, strictly following a schedule dictated by Sophie. A year later, when Sisi gave birth to her second daughter, Gisela, the same pattern repeated itself. Sophie took the baby into her own quarters, citing the same reasons. These actions created significant conflict between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. The tensions were constant, and to Sisi's great dismay, Franz Joseph often supported his mother's decisions, leaving Sisi increasingly isolated and frustrated within her own family. In the spring of 1857, Sisi insisted on taking her daughters on an official trip to Hungary, despite Sophie's strong objections. During the journey, both girls became ill. While Gisela recovered, little Sophie tragically passed away in Budapest on May 29, 1857. This devastating loss forever changed Sisi, who was never the same joyful young woman again. She spent months locked in her room in total darkness, blaming herself for her daughter's death. Meanwhile, the Archduchess insinuated that the tragedy was a result of Sisi's negligence, a sentiment that many at court echoed. After this loss, Sisi gave up any attempt to challenge Sophie and left Gisela's upbringing entirely in her hands. Not even the birth of her son, Rudolf, the long-awaited heir to the throne, on August 21, 1858, could alleviate her sorrow. Rudolf, too, was placed under Sophie's care, further distancing Sisi from her children. She rarely visited Rudolf and grew increasingly estranged from Gisela. Instead, she dedicated her time to visiting charitable institutions, psychiatric hospitals, and shelters, seeking a purpose to ease her depression. In 1859, she organized the establishment of a hospital to care for the wounded from the Battle of Solferino. Despite her humanitarian efforts, Sisi could never adapt to the customs and rigid protocol of the Viennese court. Franz Joseph provided little support, avoiding discussions of state matters with her and relying on his mother for important decisions. Over time, rumors about Franz Joseph's infidelities began to circulate. Although such behavior was common among rulers of the era, it deeply hurt Sisi, plunging her into episodes of severe depression. Her health began to deteriorate, and she tried to combat her anxiety and sadness with intense physical exercise, often lasting up to 8 hours a day. She would ride long distances on horseback and walk so briskly that her ladies-in-waiting struggled to keep up. By late 1860, her physical condition had become so fragile that the court physician recommended she spend time in a warmer climate. Sisi chose the island of Madeira, a destination frequently praised by her favorite brother-in-law, Maximilian. However, at that time, no suitable ship was available for her journey. Queen Victoria of the United Kingdom offered her private yacht, allowing Sisi to finally travel to the island. In Madeira, Sisi rented a house by the sea, where she spent several months recovering. During this time, a photograph of Sisi with her ladies-in-waiting was sent to Vienna, fueling rumors that the Empress was merely using her health as an excuse to escape her duties and enjoy a life of leisure. However, her physician was adamant that she should not return to Vienna before May, when the climate would be more favorable. During this stay, Sisi not only regained her physical health but also rebuilt her self-esteem. She began to see herself as an attractive woman again, gradually restoring her confidence. After 6 months away, Sisi returned to Vienna in May 1861. However, upon confronting the rigid realities of court life once more, her health deteriorated again. The persistent cough and fever returned, and her refusal to eat alarmed both the emperor and her doctors. Once again, she was advised to seek a warmer climate. This time, Sisi chose the Greek island of Corfu as her destination. Her health began to improve even during the journey, as her cough disappeared and her appetite returned. Fascinated by Greek culture, she started studying the language and commissioned the construction of a villa on the island, which she named the Achillaion. She returned to Corfu many times, finding solace in the Mediterranean air and the freedom it provided. By 1862, when she returned to Vienna, Sisi was no longer the submissive young woman who had arrived to marry Franz Joseph. She was now a confident woman, though she still despised public appearances. She resumed her long walks and horseback rides and attended official events only when absolutely necessary, withdrawing as soon as she could, often citing ill health. The public's perception of Sisi began to shift. While she had once been admired, her popularity gradually waned. Many noticed that the emperor appeared increasingly alone, as the empress, rather than staying by his side, preferred to travel the world. In August of 1865, Sisi made a decisive move. She threatened Franz Joseph with permanently leaving Vienna unless he changed the military training regimen imposed on their son Rudolf. At just 7 years old, the boy was enduring harsh and, in Sisi's view, inhumane methods. Franz Joseph initially tried to explain that such training was essential to prepare Rudolf as a future ruler, but Sisi remained resolute. Ultimately, the emperor relented, fearing her departure. From that point on, Sisi personally took charge of her children's education, and her authority began to be respected. During this period, her beauty reached its zenith. Standing at an impressive 5 feet 7 inches, she was taller than the emperor, a fact often concealed in official portraits. Sisi adhered to a strict daily exercise regimen and followed rigorous diets composed mainly of liquids and fruits, particularly oranges. She avoided eating in public and, if she felt she had overindulged, would compensate with extended fasting. Her weight fluctuated between 99 and 110 pounds, and her waist never exceeded 20 inches. Obsessed with her appearance, Sisi spent countless hours grooming and caring for her hair, which reached down to her ankles. Washing it was such a laborious process that it was done only once every 3 weeks, using a mixture of eggs and cognac. She personally oversaw the design of her dresses, ensuring they fit perfectly, even while riding. To achieve this, she insisted they be tailored while she sat on horseback. Every detail had to be flawless. To maintain her figure, Sisi wore corsets so tightly laced that she sometimes struggled to breathe and even fainted. This was the price she was willing to pay to achieve the beauty standard she had set for herself. Sisi's obsession with her appearance extended to the smallest details. She ensured she was always impeccable in public. Her beauty routine was exhaustive, consuming up to 3 hours each day. She even devised her own beauty treatments, including facial masks made of meat, massages with warm olive oil, and sleeping with damp bandages around her waist to maintain her figure. Modern doctors would likely diagnose Sisi with bulimia and exercise addiction due to her extreme dedication to maintaining a slender figure and her excessive physical activity. Her strict diet, prolonged fasting, and rigorous exercise routines, often lasting hours, align with behaviors typical of these conditions. Her fixation on physical perfection and her relentless pursuit of beauty would likely be viewed today as severe eating and body image disorders. Undoubtedly, her hair was her greatest pride. Reaching her ankles, it required extraordinary care. Her hairdresser spent hours each day styling it, and any strands that fell out were collected on a tray for Sisi to inspect. Washing it, a process involving her egg and cognac mixture, took an entire day, during which Sisi refused to receive visitors. Despite her meticulous beauty regimen, Sisi was not indifferent to political matters. At the time, Hungary was part of the Austrian Empire, but dissatisfaction and calls for independence were growing rapidly among the Hungarian people. Sisi felt a deep sympathy for their culture and struggles, leading her to hire a Hungarian reader, Ida von Ferenczi, who became her closest confidant. Through Ida, she met Gyula Andrássy, an influential Hungarian politician with whom she formed a close friendship. Her support for the Hungarian cause created tensions within the Viennese court but was instrumental in the negotiations that resulted in the Austro-Hungarian Compromise of 1867. On July 8, 1867, Sisi and Franz Joseph were solemnly crowned King and Queen of Hungary in a ceremony held in Budapest. For Sisi, this moment was the pinnacle of her political life, as she felt she had achieved something meaningful by mediating between the emperor and the Hungarian people. Shortly afterward, devastating news arrived: the execution of Maximilian, Franz Joseph's brother and Sisi's favorite brother-in-law, in Mexico. Maximilian's death profoundly affected Archduchess Sophie, who withdrew from political life and ceased interfering in her daughter-in-law's affairs. In 1868, Sisi became pregnant with her fourth child, sparking rumors within the court. Some speculated that the child might be Andrassy's. However, when Marie Valerie was born on April 22, 1868, her striking resemblance to Franz Joseph quickly silenced these rumors. Marie Valerie became the center of Sisi's life, and she displayed extreme protectiveness toward her youngest daughter. This favoritism stirred jealousy in her son Rudolf, who, at 10 years old, could not understand why his mother showed a level of affection to his sister that he and Gisela had never received. At the age of 35, Sisi decided to stop sitting for photographs, determined that no evidence of her aging would remain. The images of her known after this age were crafted using earlier portraits, preserving her idealized public image. The marriage of her daughter Gisela in 1873 brought immense stress, forcing Sisi to make numerous public appearances. In 1881, her son Rudolf married Princess Stephanie of Belgium, a union Sisi vehemently disapproved of. She often referred to her daughter-in-law derisively as the camel, claiming she lacked elegance and beauty and insisting she did not bring happiness to Rudolf. To channel her frustrations, Sisi filled journals and notebooks with satirical poems targeting members of the imperial family. The death of her cousin and close confidant, King Ludwig II of Bavaria, on June 13, 1886, who was found drowned under mysterious circumstances, dealt her a devastating blow. Sisi and Ludwig shared a deep connection and often spent extended periods together. During this phase, Sisi sought solace in travel. Aboard her private yacht, the Miramar, she roamed the world, finding comfort in the distances she covered. According to a diary entry by her daughter Marie Valerie, Sisi, at 50 years old, had a small anchor tattooed on her shoulder, a symbol of her free spirit and love for the sea. Despite her position as empress, Sisi constantly sought to escape the constraints of the court. On her journeys, she experienced fleeting moments of freedom, but the weight of her duties and the tragedies surrounding her always loomed, reminding her that even the most legendary empress of the 19th century could not escape her destiny. If her life had already been filled with profound sorrow, in 1889, Sisi faced the most devastating blow of all. In January of that year, her only son, Rudolf, heir to the throne at just 30 years old, was found dead from a gunshot wound to the head alongside his 17-year-old mistress, Mary Vetsera. This event, known as the Mayerling incident, remains one of the most intriguing mysteries in history. While the official explanation declared it a murder-suicide pact, the true circumstances of the tragedy continue to spark speculation. Rudolf's death shattered Sisi entirely. From that moment on, she dressed exclusively in black, rarely appearing in public and withdrawing almost entirely from Viennese social life. She dedicated herself to constant travel, always under a pseudonym and without official escort, seeking solace in solitude to ease her grief. Sisi, acutely aware of the emotional distance between herself and her husband, openly encouraged Franz Joseph's special friendship with actress Katharina Schratt. This arrangement provided companionship for the emperor in Vienna while Sisi absented herself for long periods without guilt over leaving her husband. Though unconventional, it worked for both parties. Amid her own despair, Sisi enthusiastically supported the marriage of her most beloved daughter, Marie Valerie, to Archduke Franz Salvatore of Austria-Tuscany. This match stirred controversy, as Franz Salvatore's title was considered inferior by court standards, but Sisi defended the union, prioritizing her daughter's happiness over the rigid conventions of the court. Sisi's life, from her birth to its end, was nothing short of extraordinary. Yet if her existence seemed like a grand drama, her death was even more shocking and theatrical, a conclusion no poet or writer could have imagined. On September 10, 1898, while walking briskly along the Geneva waterfront with her lady-in-waiting, Sisi fell victim to an assassination. Her attacker, an Italian anarchist named Luigi Lucchini, had been lying in wait near the pier where she was planning to board a steamship. Luigi Lucchini approached Sisi, feigning a stumble, and in a swift motion, drove a homemade stiletto into her chest. The Empress, unaware of the severity of the wound due to the weapon's small size, managed to rise and walk nearly 100 meters before collapsing on board the ship. Her lady-in-waiting, horrified, loosened her corset to help her breathe, only to discover a small spot of blood on her chest. The weapon had pierced Sisi's heart, though the external wound was nearly invisible. The ship had already set sail when the lady-in-waiting revealed Sisi's identity to the captain, who immediately turned back to the port. The Empress was quickly transported to the hotel where she had been staying. She briefly regained consciousness and, in a faint voice, asked, "What has happened?" Moments later, she closed her eyes forever. At 60 years old, the legendary Empress of Austria had been assassinated. Ironically, Sisi had written words in her diary that seemed almost prophetic. "I would like to leave this world like a bird ascending to the sky or like smoke vanishing into the distance. I wish for my soul to escape to the heavens through a small fissure in my heart." The news of her assassination sent shockwaves across Europe. Franz Joseph, devastated by the loss, immediately activated the protocol for repatriating her body from Switzerland to Vienna. In the days that followed, the Austro-Hungarian Empire's capital was draped in mourning. Yet, Sisi's last wish, that her ashes be scattered at sea, was never fulfilled. Having arrived in Geneva incognito, Sisi returned to Vienna in a coffin, accompanied by a solemn procession. She was interred with full honors in the Imperial crypt of Vienna, a place she had confessed to loathing. During her life, she had expressed disdain for the idea of resting eternally in such a cold and opulent tomb, but dynastic tradition prevailed over her personal desires. Sisi's assassination marked the end of an era. Her life, a tapestry of contrasts, between opulence and tragedy, freedom and constraint, left behind a legacy that continues to captivate the world.